our study of language is going to center a lot around words. When we analyze words linguistically, we find that there are a number of different aspects to what it means to know a word. They include knowing what the word means, how the word is spelled, and the sounds that make up the word. For both spelling and sound, we can break words down into smaller pieces. So a word like cats has 4 different letters in it that we're going to call graphemes, C-A-T and S. The word cats also has 4 phonemes in it, k, a, t, and s. The meaning of a word can also be broken down into parts, each little bit having a part of the meaning of the word. So in the case of cats, we have cat for the cattiness and s for the plural. For something like independent, we have a prefix in, the main word depend, and the suffix ent. The distinctive letters that make up a word are called graphemes. The distinctive sounds that make up a word are called phonemes. And those distinctive little meaningful bits that make up a word are called morphemes. We store all of this information about words in our mental lexicon. In phonetic transcription, we try to record what was said as accurately as possible. But transcription is always subject to perceptual bias on the part of the transcriber. Our knowledge of language and background affects how we hear speech, and so to accurately transcribe what was produced can sometimes be a challenge. We have our own knowledge of how we would pronounce the word. Sometimes the way we do a phonetic transcription can be influenced by our knowledge of spelling. And the phonemic system that you have in your language may affect how you perceive other dialects of English or other languages if you get into linguistics more generally. So for example, we have a medial version of the T or D sound that in my dialect is the same. So if I say baddie, or if I say buddy, I have the same sound in there, which is our alveolar flap or tap, that kind of R-looking symbol in phonetic transcription. We can take 2 sentences like I hit an adder and I hit an adder. Again, I have the same consonant in both of those situations. So transcription of adder would involve that flap sound, as well as the a vowel at the beginning, the vowel at the end. I mentioned the morpheme in cats that indicates the plural. When we take that same plural and apply it to dog, we get dogs. So in one case we have a s sound, and in the other case we have a z sound. And English spelling has lots of cases of the same spelling resulting in different sounds, or different spelling resulting in the same sound. So we have through and bow. We have glue and blue. In one case, the same spelling, different vowels. In the other case, different spelling, same vowels. So we have some special terminology for these cases, like where there's difference in sound without a difference in spelling, or a difference in spelling without a difference in sound. Different spellings of the same sound are called allographs. If we study how kids acquire language and literacy, we would get more in-depth into their spelling abilities and their grapheme and allograph system. So the allographs of a sound consist of 1 or more letters or graphemes, all the different ways that we can spell out a particular sound. For phonetic transcription, what we're looking at is individual speech sounds or phonemes. As I've mentioned before, we're going to use the International Phonetic Alphabet, a writing system where each symbol is supposed to represent 1 speech sound. So there's a 1-to-1 correspondence between graphemes and sounds. So we don't have any groups of allographs like we do in ordinary spelling. You can use this to transcribe just about any language. We'll extensively study those symbols that get used in English and practice them a lot. To highlight that we're doing a transcription rather than a spelling, we mark that transcription with slashes or brackets. So a transcription of fees, for example, would have slashes or brackets so that we know it's not fizz. You're going to have plenty of symbols, mostly for consonants, that are familiar from English spelling. If you happen to have studied Spanish or French, some of the vowel sounds may be familiar. So we have E, A, U, O, and Y for those symbols. And then others are going to take some extra practice to learn. I've started you on that process by giving you a word list, and we'll continue to work on those in labs. The term phoneme is a technical term in linguistics that refers to a sound distinction in a language. We do have variants of different phonemes, ways of producing a phoneme that results in different sounds. And these variants are called allophones, and it says non-contrastive variants there, and that's sort of an important topic in linguistic analysis. Things are only allophones if they can't be used to make a difference between words. Sometimes the term phone is used to refer to a speech sound if you're being very careful about the physical sound itself rather than the sound as a part of the phonology of a language. So an example of a phoneme and its allophones, we have all the different variants of the T sound. It can be aspirated like it is in top. It can be unreleased at the end of pot. It can be unaspirated when it's in a cluster like stop. It can be flapped, as I've exemplified a bunch of times, like in butter. And in my dialect, something like button doesn't have a really a t-like thing at all. It's got a glottal stop, which is articulated by the larynx rather than by the tongue at the alveolar ridge. So all of these different sounds, these different phones, are allophones of the same phoneme, so I don't get a distinction if I happen to pronounce button very carefully. It's not a different word from button. So depending on how precise we want to be in our transcription, we can worry about whether we're doing a broad transcription more focused on kind of the sounds of the language system and the phonemes, or a very narrow transcription specifically on how the speech sounds that are produced. I'll generally use slashes for broad transcription and brackets for narrow transcription. A lot of the practical transcription that you might do as a speech-language pathologist, for example, is probably somewhere in between a broad phonemic transcription and a very narrow phonetic transcription, basically depending on your needs. Phonetic transcription is a tool that we use to analyze speech. So when we get on to the individual phonemes, the individual sounds of English, there are a variety of pieces of that as well. We know what the phoneme sounds like, so we can recognize it when we hear it, including all of its allophonic variants. We know how to produce the phoneme so that we can say the sound, also including all of its allophonic variants. And the role that the sound plays in the language sound structure, the fact that it is a phoneme, different from other phonemes that you can use to make differences between words. So, two different phones, two different sounds are allophones of different phonemes if they can be used to make what's called a minimal pair. This is like a piece of linguistic evidence for the role a sound plays in a language system. A minimal pair is a pair of words that differ by just one sound, just one phone. So for example, we know in English that S and Z, S and Z sounds, are different phonemes or allophones of different phonemes because we have different words like su and zu that have different meanings where there are only differences in that sound. Similarly, Kate versus gate, being words that have different meanings, shows us that k and g are allophones of different phonemes. But as I mentioned, how I pronounce button doesn't make it a different word. If I produce button normally with a glottal stop, or if I produce it carefully with a T, it's the same word in both cases. Similarly, if I take something like that unreleased version of a consonant that tends to happen at the end of a word, I don't get a different word if I release it. So a normal production of stop would be unreleased, but if I say stop and have a little p, not sure how well the microphone picks that up, a little p release at the end, it doesn't make it a different word, at least not in English. All of this information about what phonemes and their various allophones are is part of our knowledge of language sound structure, and in linguistics that's called the phonology.